Hey, hey,
What up?
what's happening?
Hey, fellas.
How are you, gentlemen?
Terrific.
Doing great. Doing really good.
Yeah, look at this. I've
Brian,
been
look
I've
at
been
you.
seeing the doctor
Daylight
touching
where
up
you
the
are. I'm jealous.
complexion.
Look at you.
See, yeah, Yappy did my makeup before we got on.
Mm. Well, this is going great.
I'm telling you, yeah. So what's up, gentlemen?
Oh, it's let's start with Bruce so he can brag how warm it is. How he was out in flip-flops today, probably cooking dinner on the grill and just enjoying his best life out there in the sunshine.
Yeah.
Well, I might have been in flip flops except I was at work in the hospital, so
Well, you
that's
can
a
wear
little
flip
bummer.
flops there.
It was a little cloudy, a little bit rainy today here, but I was inside all day anyway, so it didn't matter too much. But the weather here, it's 70s I think today, and we got a little rain. It's gonna be a little cooler, but it's very nice. It's fall weather here.
It's
We have some days in
cooler.
the 80s, some days in the 70s. That's kind of what our weather's like right now for the next few days, I think. So it's
In
perfect for McPro weather, actually.
in my area, we have a high of in the next 10 days 64, and we have a low of 41. So, yeah. What that basically means, Greg, is that we're very soon we're going to be getting these pictures sent to us as text messages, and it's going to show this, beautiful sunset with a flag, and maybe somebody's feet in their flip flops. So, yeah,
Sunburnt
sunburn,
flip-flops. Oh my gosh.
sunburn. Yep, yeah, yeah. So look at this. It's like he's never
He's
done
never
this.
done this before. Look at he probably had a real funny joke there. He's laughing so hard.
And he's
He
laughing
doesn't even
too.
know he's
Doesn't even
muted.
realize he's muted.
I was talking the whole time, and you guys never heard me.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, we got 70s, 60s, and 70s and 80s, and then a couple days in the 60s coming up for highs.
Let's put him back on mute, Brian. How do we put him back on mute again?
Yeah, I
Nobody
know.
wants to hear that.
Jeez.
Goodness gracious. You'd think after almost 2 years of this, I'd figure that mute thing out, wouldn't you?
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah. Oh well, it happens. So
So
what?
Bruce is warm.
Yeah.
Bruce, I just saw and really enjoyed the video you just put out. You had a lot of info packed into one video. Everything from splitting, using double screen boards, trying out some new lids, feeding right before you made the splits, how you made the splits, or requeen, and then added a bunch of queens there. So that was a great video, an enormous amount of info kind of packed into one video. It's hard to break. You would have had to have broke that out into so many individual videos where you're going to have people trailing along for a 5-part series if you tried to break it down into 5-minute or 4-minute clips. So I like the long play the way you did there, because there were so many components within that. Anyone who watches that has to walk away with, oh my gosh, I just saw something different. I just saw a new tool for the toolbox. I really enjoyed that video, Bruce.
Well, I appreciate it. I want to give a shout out to Spirit of Toad. He's on here tonight. It's Eric Varnum. He lives over in Southwest Georgia, just across the river over there a little ways. And he's about an hour to an hour and a half away from here. And he just, he knows his way around a beehive, and he was a tremendous help getting everything set up. We spent that morning in Ozark, which is, you can see part of that you can see in the video. But then we spent most of the day, actually. We went to some other bee yards and did some stuff. Later in the day, the previous video, actually, we went in and found Big Red, short video with that. And he was there down in Slocum to help me with that. And so we just had a really good day. He's a good guy, and he knows his way around a beehive and just loves the bees. And he helped me make some decisions. With some of those queens, it's hard sometimes for me to, decide whether to pinch the queen or not, or to maybe shake some bees out or combine some hives. And he kind of helped me make some of those tough decisions. So it was good to have, a second person there to kind of help me make those decisions. And I think we made all the right decisions. And he asked right here, how those queens turn out? Well, they're in the hives now. And for the final results, you'll have to watch the next video, which should be coming out hopefully by this weekend.
Ooh. Ooh.
Can't
And
wait to see that.
that's going to be focused on those queens and how that's basically going to be the main topic of that video. Is actually in the next video I plan to have, you know, each, I think I got video of all 7 of the queens and what the results were, so where they made it or not. And I will tell you the results were good, but I'm not going to tell you how good. We'll put it that way.
Uh-oh. You got us really hanging.
So Greg knows, but I'm not going to tell him. I don't know if I told you, Brian, or not, but I'm going to tell anybody else until
No.
then. So
You-
anyway,
you've
but
got
we're
to watch-
going to, what's that?
I was just going to tell everybody, you've got to watch Bruce's next video. He's not going to give it all away here. Watch his video.
Yeah. Well, I would say, I mean, I really struggled because, like you said, Greg, there's a lot of information in that video. I really struggled with the title and thumbnail on that video. Like, what can you name that video? I didn't know really what to name it. And so I'm not sure that it is catching people's attention like I hoped it would, but I just don't know really how to capture
All that.
what I did in that video. But basically, just for a little recap, you know, Eric and I went in the video. It's all based in Ozark. Eric and I went through those colonies up there and we checked on the Michael Palmer queens. We checked on which hives were still a little spicy, kind of which bees we wanted to requeen or make splits off of. We used double screen boards. We used some of Greg's bucket feeders. We used some of his lids. Really, we checked for mites in one colony on there or two. So we just did a lot of really all the fall things that you need to do is what we did. And then the real topic of the video overall was getting those bees kind of prepped for some queens I got from Greg, 7 queens that he sent me, and late season queens, some of his late season queens to try out down here to kind of combine with those Michael Palmer queens and just see if we can create a really good, strong bee here for South Alabama. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to do there. If you've been following the channel, you'll know that's been my obsession with my bees for the last few months, is to kind of get that Ozark bee yard, which is, you see Grammy on here. They've run out of the bee yard a couple times. They were so feisty. And so I think, Lisa, if you come up there again, you know, I think they'll let you stay next time you come up there. They're much better already. And I look forward to really seeing how they do. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about this as the video goes on tonight, about kind of what my plans are in the future with those bees and how to get them into my entire operation, you know, if I like the results of what we see. But that's kind of what I've been focused on. So I hope if you haven't seen that video, go watch it and spread the word. I think there's a lot of information in there, a lot of people who may be new beekeepers or even experienced beekeepers that, you know, Eric and me on there together. I think it's just a really good, I think, informational video. And then that was on last Friday. And then Saturday, I went there myself. The queens came from Greg. He mailed me and I went ahead and introduced them, got them in the colonies and in their cages with the candy. And so the next video will be actually what the results of the acceptance rate was up there.
Awesomeness. Awesome. Mr. Burns.
Well, I just want to say, Bruce, but if I know we'll talk at some point between now and in the spring, but what was special about those queens, the reason we went through the extra steps to mark them with numbers instead of just paint, is those were pretty special queens. We get everyone's queens taken care of, and any orders that were going to fulfill kind of too late in the year, those get tagged on for this coming year's queens. And then as we do that, we finally get on to taking care of all the queens that we need for our own genetic stock to make sure everything that we're doing for our genetic program. And in doing that, we end up with making some crosses and grafting very specific queens to make sure that we are really doubling down on very specific genetics. And so in doing that, we end up with another 30, 40, or 50 very specific queens that aren't queens that go out as part of an order. They're queens for us to kind of trial, take a look at, see what they're doing. And then out of all of those, we earmark the real rock stars. And so what was fun for me, Bruce, is to send you with those seven of the kind of stash of those breeder queens that we have and we're working on and letting mature, able to send you 7 of those. So you were able to kind of take advantage of not only our queen breeding program, but the most latest and recent addition of that, where we've blended double Caucasian genetics inside of our New World Carnies, Caucasian and then our Appalachian mutt line. So for me, it's pretty cool to be able to get those down to you. They've made an amazing impact on our genetic line here. So knowing you're trying to work on your genetics, get your outfit to the point to where you can start making nucs, maybe making queens in the future, you got to have stock that's gentle. You got to have stock that's hardy. You got to have stock that kind of check all those boxes. So for me, it's a win-win. If we get queens down to you for that, that helps out your yard tremendously. So I'm looking forward to seeing what those ones do. So that's why those have numbers and not just dots. Those are open-mated breeder queens, which are trialed, proven. We've got the entire history of their existence. So those are, hope you enjoy those ones, Bruce.
Greg, what are you expecting as far as the traits of these queens? What are you thinking what are they gonna do? What are they gonna be like?
They've really kind of, we've more refined the Pepto Pink even further, getting them to be even more winter hardy. At least I feel, get them to be where they continue to. It's a long conversation, but with any queen breeding program, when you open mate, you eventually get to a point where you feel like you're kind of at a brick wall, where you want to keep making strides and you want to keep moving things forward. But with any set of attributes, you may have things that you start to see, or they're not as consistent. So if you make 1,000 queens, you may see 300 are exactly what you want. 300 are really nice queens, but they vary a little bit. And then 300 that are just, where did this gold color come from? Or where did this particular attribute come from? And so you're constantly weeding through and only putting the best foot forward with those. So in doing so, we're looking for a couple things. Number one, we're looking for bees that make a lot of propolis. That is really important for us. There's a lot of antiviral components with propolis and what that actually does for the bees. So we're doubling down on bees that make a lot of propolis. We're doubling down on Caucasian genetics and not just a single line. You know, I think you guys know the story. A couple years back, I went down, visited with Bob Benny, brought back a bunch of queen cells, mated queens, and also singles, all having some of those New World Carney and Caucasian genetics that he sourced from Sue Kobe. He had also had blended some of those with his own stock. That was a great starting point and a great addition to kind of marry up to what our genetics were. And like we talked about, each our back line, our back stock here of Nature's Image Farm queens versus those, there wasn't a lot of difference. There were some color differences, there were some behavioral things, but they really weren't set out different than the other until we crossed them and they started to really advance, and we started to see a lot of great improvements. And then those improvements started to kind of stall. We weren't quite seeing as fast as, or as we weren't seeing those attributes continue to express themselves over and over and over again. And so we thought, well, let's go back to the source. Let's go back to where some of these Caucasian lines come from, and then let's get access to genetics where we can pull in double Caucasian, pulling different drone genetics with mother queen colony genetics, bringing those two together, using those as the AI backbone of everything else. So I say all of that, Bruce, to say that we're doubling down on propolis, doubling down on the Caucasian attributes, doubling down on the bees that just wait until it's the right time to kickstart in the spring without brooding too soon. We're doubling down on the colonies that want to kind of downsize on their own. They're more what we call a frugal colony, frugal bees. So it's really important. It seems to be a real big winner. And here's the thing that I got to be careful, and then we'll move on, is what we're finding is that our bees are continuing to have low mite washes. So when we are doubling down on all these other things that are benefiting the bees, we're actually finding that low mites is just a consequence of that, because I think they're excelling in so many areas. I think what you end up doing is you end up breeding for hygienic behavior without exactly going for hygienic behavior. And it seems to be something that's an additive trait or quality mixed in with all that. So I think you're going to expect to see a lot of things like that there, Bruce. But in short, you got the best of the best from the history of us, the best of the best with the current breeding program all put together. So you should have a really good picture on not only what our bees do, but what your bees can do moving forward.
Well, I hope I can just keep them alive.
That'd be a good start.
Maybe they'll survive in spite of the beekeeper here. So we'll see.
Well, I know where to get you 1 or 2 more if you ever have any problems.
All right, man. I appreciate it. It's going to be a fun experiment. And of course, I'll be tracking that through the next, for a while, for, hopefully years down the road. If things continue to go like they are, maybe I can continue to follow that story and see what we end up, going into next year. And then possibly if the genetics all work out pretty good, maybe start expanding that out into the rest of my operation. That's just one of like 4 bee yards or 5 bee yards that I have. And I want people to know, if you've watched my channel, you know that I've got some pretty tough, rugged bees that are productive. But the one piece that I've really been wanting to kind of hone in on is the attitude. They've just been, I just don't want to have that reputation of the spicy bee attitude. I still have a few like that in other bee yards, but if I can get those arcs straightened out, which I think overall is my spiciest yard, and then kind of expand out from there, and just see what we end up with, in the operation. But for right now, I'm pretty excited. I was able to walk in front of those bees. If you watch to the end of the video, I was able to walk right in front of all those colonies, and a lot of those were the Michael Palmer queens, and just the whole thing. I could just, walk around out there without any veil or anything on, right in front of the colonies, and that was not doable.
That's huge. It's a big deal. So the meanest ones, the most aggressive ones, there were about 3 left out there that were pretty spicy still. And, Eric and I identified those, and we got the queens changed out in them. So they may still be a little bit spicy, but hopefully that will change real soon once these queens kind of take control. Well, that's the neat thing, is you're building on the work of everyone else before you, just like me, just like the genetics that all came before us. We take those, we bring them in, we mix them up. We only breed from the very, very best, and it just keeps refining. And so it's going to be, so what you're doing is you're planting seeds in your apiary with the Palmer stock, with our stock, and creates a nursery of genetics for you to be able to fine tune and move anything you want in whatever direction that you want to see it. That's pretty cool.
Plus, there were some of the original stock that were there that were just perfectly fine too. So kind of even a combination of some of the stuff from the past. It's not all Palmer, and it's just kind of a combination of, and your bees last year, I think the queens that I got from you last year, a lot of them had superseded, and the bees are really good still. And I think Eric was impressed with some of those as well. And so that's already a daughter of some of those, and so they already have good, so they've already crossed with a lot of other stuff. So it's going to be. I wonder
if those superseded, or if the pink mark is getting chewed off, because the queen in that photo, or the queen in the video, there's a couple things I noticed. Number one, she was giant. Number two, she had a very defined and mature thorax, and she looked bald as a baby's butt.
Yeah, so it would have been from earlier in the year. A lot of them had different queens earlier in the year, like probably spring, early summer. I don't know when it happened, because once honey season hit, I kind of just was hanging on, by the skin of my teeth at that point. So I'm not sure when it. I guess it's possible that
Swarm,
happened,
superseded, chewed off paint. Who knows?
But either way, the attitude's great. Whatever it is, I mean, I know it's got to have your genetics in there, because I mean, that's what was in there, last summer. So even if it's the one, if the paint got rubbed off, or if it's a brand new queen, if the attitude, if everything looks good, hey, let's just roll with it, right?
Absolutely. Keep moving forward.
All right.
Awesome. Brian, what are you up to?
Oh man, almost getting situated where I want to be. So I had one honey super that I thought I pulled all my supers, and I walked out the other day to drop strips, and I looked and I was like, why the heck does that colony have 3 boxes on it? So evidently I can't count. So I got that taken care of. I got strips on them, and I had one colony that wasn't quite where I wanted it to be at, but I expected that. It was one that was very small, and I requeened them, and I got that one condensed down into one box now. So everything's kind of getting there, and I got feed on 6 of the 16. So the ones that I didn't get feed on are the ones that I need to drill some holes in some bucket into the plugs and get those all on. But I got everything situated now, I think, and I was telling Bruce, I think, just about standardizing equipment. And before I think there were 3 or 4 different style feeders that I've kind of accumulated throughout the years. And it's just dealing with multiple, different feeder types. Just it's too much. And when you're looking at time and you're looking at being efficient going through your apiary, it was just too much. So that's why I think probably this entire year when I would come down, I'd pick up 2 lids, from you, 2 covers. Next time down, I'd pick up 1 or 2. And I was picking up those Apame bottom boards and different things just because I'm trying to standardize my equipment across the board. So easy. So those bottom boards, the reason why I was putting those on, because now I don't need to worry about mouse guards. So it's just different things that I'm trying to do so that I don't have to spend that additional time. So when I get down home, I've got some sugar and I got my buckets, and I'm going to mix up my 2 to 1 and get those buckets on. I'll probably end up doing it Friday night in the dark, but I mean, putting buckets on top of a colony in the dark,
that's no big deal.
Yeah, it's not going to hurt anything. So, but I'm almost there. I mean, I wish I would have had this done, gosh, a week or 2 ago, but it's just, I mean,
it's the name of the game right now, isn't it?
It is. And, Sunday, when I had gone over just to drop strips, the one guy that got 2 colonies from me, he had come down to get an extractor, and a couple of them in my front, and which ones those are, probably were a little bit chippy or spicy or whatever words you want to use to describe them. And when I popped the lid, I mean, a couple of them come out, and I had a jacket on, and they went straight for his head. So he went back, and I told him, I said, just stand up over there.
So those rascals, it wasn't just a 1 or 2 time thing. They just continually be.
They're straight at your face.
Characters. Okay.
So, but that's okay. I mean, next year, I mean, I have a plan already in place. The order is sitting there, and then next year it's just when I can cruise on down to your place, I've got those queens that'll be there, and I'm going to fix it. And probably moving forward, what I'm going to do is, I don't think I'm going to tinker around with, anything at least that I haven't tried in my apiary. If I see videos and they're working out for other people, well, that's great. But I know at least where to get my calm bees from. So, and I probably next year though, and I'm going to have to look at throughout the winter what happens, because I want to replace early in the season, as soon as, you start pumping out queens, but I'm going to replace them all across the board.
Hey, I got an idea for you. Here's what you do. I think you've got, let's see. What do you have, 30 or 40 queens on order with us? I know you got, 10 or 15 or 20. Okay.
Yeah.
So here's just an idea. Now you have to be transparent. You have to be honest.
Oh, yeah.
But you might find somebody who specifically wants exactly what you have in that box. So here's just an idea. In the spring, sell an overwintered nuke with thus and such genetics.
Yeah.
And have a disclaimer that these bees they have attitude.
Right.
Some people like mean bees. Some people think that they do better. So great. So why not sell an overwintered nuke with those queens in there to somebody who wants that? And then you've got 10 queens on us. You let that colony build up, make that split, pull that nuke off with the overwintered queen, sell it off to somebody who knows exactly what they're getting, and then boom, just requeen it with one of ours, move them on down the road.
Yeah, that's an idea. I mean, to be honest, what my plan was next year anyways is where my 2 rows are located, I'm going to clear a little bit of an area behind that and put up a nuke bench.
Nice.
And I want it so that it can hold 15 or 20. And that way, anything additional. No.
Bruce, did you hear that?
I heard
Brian's
it.
got 20 nukes for sale next year.
We heard it first right here on the stream team.
You heard it here first.
No. And hey,
if
you know
if
what?
he's going to add 20, that means he's going to be about 35 or 40.
Yeah,
He's got to
He's
have
got
at
room for
least
20
50%
more.
more just in case. So look at that.
I do have to say here, Sandy here, suburban homesteader. Yesterday I was so darn busy. She did a live stream for her 80,000 subscribers. So just want to
Nice.
congratulate her again
Awesome.
on that. So yeah, so well deserved. But she's great lady, great channel. So yeah, congrats again, Sandy. But my plan is this, and I was telling the guy that was over the other day, I told him, like, I'm going to look at my colonies that overwinter, and if I lose whatever, I told him if I lose 4 of 16, I'll accept that. I don't want to lose 25%. If I stay above a 90% survival, that would be, I think that's more or less what I'll accept. If I lose anything less than that, then I'm going to probably look at things and, hey, what do I have to tweak? But I think I'll be up there. But what I want to do is just any dead outs that I have, I'll replace those. And then any additional are going to go back. They're going to get set up on that nuke bench. So,
yeah.
And that's all I'm going to do is I'm going to do my splits. And if people do want overwintered, for whatever overwintered means to them, it doesn't mean anything other than the beekeeper.
She didn't die.
Right. But truthfully, to say you want an overwintered, nuke, it just means that the person that had them before you was able to keep them alive. That's all it means. So you're getting a little bit of an older queen. So, but
isn't that a weird thing? Marketing in general on a lot of these things, on different products, on no matter what that it is, you have a consumer base who either really doesn't or does know the nuance with whatever that it is. And, sometimes there's only so much you can do on explaining exactly what it is, but they still want a certain thing,
It's all marketing.
Yeah.
So
that's the hard part with folks that are beginning, whether they're, there's really 2 different audiences for nukes. There's kind of 2 separate markets, really. Well, I guess the rabbit hole, it could get more complicated than that. But by and large, Brian, what you or Bruce will have as you get into selling nukes is you'll pretty much have 2 separate markets. You'll have one market will be for a beginning beekeeper who doesn't know anything about bees other than they've heard that packaged bees are evil and that they should start off with a local nuke to get off to the best start. And that's a long conversation. And then you have another market base who is the person who is growing their apiary, and they're looking for specific genetics, not just in the queen, but also in the drones. So they can either graft off it or they can start flooding their areas with those. This year we had one order of 60 singles. They were singles when they left here, go out. And that's why someone was buying so many, is to flood those areas with those drones, have that queen mother stock to be able to influence and seed the rest of the apiaries as they grew for that fella. So you can only do so much with educating that customer. But at the end of the day, when you are clear about what it is that you are selling, and that is exactly what they want and they understand it, like Grandpa said, when both folks can walk away with a smile and a handshake, then it was a good deal. But hey, you might find somebody wants that overwintered queen. That's a little bit spicy. You might find that somebody wants, someone doesn't want to drive down the nature's image, but they want our stock. They might just wait for you to get your queens from us. You requeen your splits, and then they get on the road with a nuke that's got one of our queens in it, and they can have a piece of both.
Yeah.
So now what we need to do is get Bruce to get. So now we need some nice bees from Bruce. We need some nice bees from Brian, and then we'll make StreamTeam nukes up. That'd be wild, wouldn't it?
There you go. There we go.
Who knows where it's going? Who knows where this is headed?
Oh man.
So Brian, what are we talking about tonight? Other than just, I feel like this is and I really don't mind. We can talk about bees. We can talk about the trees. We can talk about neither and just ramble on, and I'm okay with that. But what do you have in mind? What else? What else do you want to talk about?
And
You're going to say something. I'm sure it was funny. I just stepped on your joke.
I'll keep it to myself.
There it goes. There goes Brian's joke right down the road. Okay.
No, I just figured that we would chat and talk about the fall beekeeping and just chat. So
yeah, if anybody's got any questions,
I did
shoot them to us.
Oh, I already
all caps or super chat, super
one.
stickers, all that stuff kind of helps us stand out a little bit. But shoot them in here.
Right.
Oh yeah, Nick Zoots, or a ProSuite versus mixing our own syrup. Well, I can blab on about that. Do you guys have an opinion? The question, I guess, is ProSuite versus mixing. Let's just do pros, cons. Brian, what do you think? What are pros and cons on ProSuite or mixing?
I mean, they each. So for me, at my scale, either really have worked. I've gotten ProSuite from Greg, and it I mean, the bees took it. It worked out exceptionally well. But then for me, mixing syrup, it's also, I mean, if you're thinking about the number of colonies that I have, I don't have to get a motor and I don't have to get all that stuff, to mix it. It's still very easy for me. I just get a couple 5-gallon buckets and mix it up and walk out and dump it. So at a hobbyist level, I think, without all of the mess and everything, I think either works. Now ProSuite does have its benefits. And then if you add in Hive Alive into regular syrup, well, then you have some benefits there. I mean, you could put Hive Alive in the ProSuite too, but either, I think, there's pros and cons, I think, to each, but for me, either work. So now when you're at a scale, if you scale up and you have 100 plus colonies like Bruce, and you have, soon to be, I think it was Nature's Image Farm hashtag 3,000. When you get to that level, it's a little more difficult. Right. So when you do scale up, that's one of the things that you have to consider when you do feed. And right now is a time of the year that, well, what are we doing? We're feeding. What's time-wise, what's the most efficient method? So for the Queen Fund.
Oh nice.
Sandy, you are funny. Yeah. Bruce,
what do you think?
Have you ever tried ProSuite?
I've never tried ProSuite. I've used both sugar syrup and high fructose corn syrup. I know that some people, feel like that's the worst thing you could possibly do, but I've had the bees have just done fine on both. And I usually just mix up sugar water because it's the easiest. I can just go buy the sugar, but it's so expensive now. I do have some resources not far away where I can buy and hopefully be able to purchase some corn syrup. ProSuite is just so far away. There's not a Man Lake dealer anywhere close to me at all. And so I don't want to just buy it in 5-gallon buckets and have to pay shipping and stuff like that. And so
it doesn't make sense.
If I was going to get it, I would need to go to a place where they could fill it up in a tote. And so I just mix it or use the corn syrup, and my bees have done fine on both. And I mean, I know what, some people like Bob Benny says about the corn syrup, but he doesn't prefer it. He's used it, I think, some in the past. I know a lot of commercial guys close to me here, a lot of guys just across the line down in Florida. That's mostly what they use. And so their bees do just fine. And so, that's another debate for another day, but those are the two things I typically use. And mostly I've used sugar syrup for the most part. It's with my new setup or my system that I have with the pump and the tote. It's real easy to mix that stuff up the way I do it, and it works out well. And I've just recently started mixing the Hive Alive in it. I'm kind of trying that out now, and I think it's working well with the bees. One thing I like about the Hive Alive is that it does preserve the sugar syrup. It gets hot down here, and man, if you don't use something to preserve it within a week or so or two, it's just totally sour and you can't use it. And so
Yep.
You know, you can put it in there. I've had some, just, it was an unintentional trial, but I had some of that sugar syrup with Hive Alive in it, like sitting outside in the sun for months in a 5-gallon bucket, and opened it up. It was just like, it just totally like no problems at all. Just went ahead and
Yep.
feed it. It smelled the same, worked just fine.
Yep. You know, the Bee Man here, and it is pricey, but what Bruce just said, I still had a 5-gallon bucket of syrup from earlier in the year with Hive Live in it. And on Sunday, when I cracked it open, just because I made sure it was sealed pretty darn good and perfectly fine. Now
Yeah.
you take a bucket of sugar syrup and let it sit for what, 5-6 months. What do you think?
Oh, it'll be, yeah, nasty.
It'll be nasty. So
Yeah, the conversation turns quickly. What was it? Let's see. I didn't see it again. It has to do with the price. Hive Alive. Let's see.
Yeah.
The Bee Man. Hive Alive is really costly for an additive. Costly and expensive is one of those extremely subjective modes of thinking where folks would find value in the liquid. You can quickly start to see where it does make a lot of sense. When we first started off, I mean, we were mixing up sugar syrup in little containers in the kitchen, and then it went into a 5-gallon bucket with a paint mixer. Okay. And then it went into a 55-gallon or a 50-gallon blue drum with a submersible, and on and on and on. From there, you get to a point to where as your feed needs scale up, you start to realize potential for different ways of doing that. And for a lot of us, as we grew, and as you grow from needing to feed 2 colonies to 20 to 100 to 500, that whole entire method and plan of action changes. And so does how you go about sourcing your feed also changes, primarily due to labor force. One of the great things about ProSuite is there's always my brain's fried tonight, but there's, in business, there's really, 3 things. You can only pick 2. It's the timeliness of something, how fast it can be done, the cost of it, and quality. Okay. So speed, cost, quality. You pick 2. That's it. You can't have all 3. And so it all has pros and cons. There's always trade-offs. We have folks here who they will buy 1 or 2 packages of bees, or 1 or 2 nucs, and they will go for a 5-gallon bucket of mix because they don't want to fool around with trying to mix up feed when they want it on hand. They can just put it on the colony and be good to go. There are folks who find, as they advance with their beekeeping, they find value in having something like ProSuite because it is stable, it doesn't freeze, doesn't go bad, and it is thicker than syrup, and you can really mix with most equipment. You're going to be hard pressed to mix up a 3-to-1 using a submersible pump without burning pumps up, and that's one of those. Asking me how I know is I can't tell you how many I've burned up over $1,000 in pumps trying to figure out which could handle, which couldn't. And so eventually, after we were kind of growing through all of that and figuring out mixing sugar and all that, by the time you actually go fetch it, for most folks, if you're only buying it by the 50-pound bag or less, or, if you're buying 500 pounds of it at a time or less, those trips to and fro eat you alive on time, fuel to go get them, storage, mixing them, and the whole 9 yards, where you start to see where there's value in saving your time. So we're all in a different place with that.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we're always poor on both time and money. There's never enough of either, and never you don't have them at the same time. So as your feeding needs scale, other options, like one of the ones that we switched to years ago, after we had enough of mixing it in 50-gallon drums, we stopped that and just started getting totes of high fructose 55. And I know some people are going to say, well, how dare you feed the bees fructose? Well, what we had seen is there was a huge, when you think about this, you know, if you have overwintered, if you've been keeping bees for 5 years, you've only overwintered 5 times. Okay. If you've been keeping bees for 5 years, you've only had a spring buildup maybe 5 times. And those first 2, if you had dead outs, weren't really true spring buildups. You know, you've only had 5 shots of a flow, 5 shots of getting ready for winter, 5 shots of going through the winter. It's hard to build a lot of experience that leads to wisdom on that. It's, you know, imagine if you've only tied your shoes 5 times, right? Or rode a dirt bike 5 times. It's hard for us to think about that. But the more repetitions that you get, the more colonies that we started to build and run, we started being able to trial and see things quickly. And then we got to a place where we could use as much as unbiased feedback as we could possibly get, and started to see, well, okay, well, the bees did great on 55. We didn't have to mix anything. It was pretty much stable. It would settle and have on the bottom of it, it would kind of have it was thicker, and it would needed kind of mixed up. And that was kind of it wasn't a nightmare, but it was better than having to mix it. And then we switched to ProSuite, which is a blend of all of those feed sources. And then we noticed the feed stable, doesn't need mixed up, doesn't freeze. We can put on the colonies, and it's 11.55 pounds per gallon. That's a big deal, especially this time of year. If you really want to lay feed on those bees and get them bulked up, you're nearly putting something on nearly honey weight. That's a big deal. The sugar's already inverted too, so they can metabolize that much quicker than if you have to go out, mix up regular granulated sugar, get it into a bucket, get it into whatever your feeding type is. So the bees, I think, can access the feed a little bit quicker. Brian, you were talking about buckets just a little bit ago. Buckets are one of the most beautiful pieces of equipment this time of year, because we can put that on there. They can trickle just enough to keep enticing and just a little bit more brood rearing. But more importantly, you can put it on in the middle of the night if you had to. But what I like about it is, with the bucket, you can turn it on, you can turn it off. You know, when it's warm, like on these days, the next 2 weeks, you know, when you're in the 50s during the day, you can put the bucket on. The bees have access to nearly honey out of that bucket that they can use for just their day to day, or to start to store. And then when it gets too cold, you flip the bucket over. You can't do that. It's hard to do that with a 1-to-1. It's hard to do that. It's easier with a 2-to-1, but with a 3-to-1 in a bucket, it is just a perfect match, at least for what we're trying to do. So with anything, there's pros and cons. There are no silver bullets. There is no one way to do any of this, but understanding the nuance, understanding why someone does those things and why it works for them, is more important than trying to figure out, well, I don't like it, so da-da-da-da-da, you know.
Right. Yeah.
I'll just go on and on about that kind of stuff. But well, Lisa had a question about the corn syrup. I think you answered it there, Greg. Downside of using corn syrup, I think I haven't had any issues at all with it. I've heard from different people you have to, don't use corn syrup, but my bees have done fine on it when I've used it in the past.
You know, I think I have not had any negative consequences using fructose 55. I just haven't. I know several large commercial beekeepers who just use nothing but that, and they don't thin it down either. They use it straight in the spring. They use it throughout the entire year for the reasons that they're feeding, and they don't have any problems with it. So
this here's a good one.
Should we just
use ProSuite other than Hive Alive? Ooh.
Should we use
Greg Burns, what do you put in your ProSuite?
Boy, we've gone through this year. We've gone through one of those. What are they? The 1,000 liter milk. The big. I mean, it's like a 3-gallon tub. It makes about we've mixed up over. Let's see.
It's 10 liters.
Yeah, we've probably mixed up. We're on our second one of those big jugs. We've mixed up probably 7 or 8 totes of ProSuite this year, and we always put Hive Alive in it. It's expensive. It's not cheap, but the ProSuite itself isn't going bad. That's not why we're putting the Hive Alive in there. what we're seeing is when, for us personally, when we're coming out of the spring specifically, and when we're going into the wintertime, right? So right now, going into the wintertime, um, it is my personal opinion that I do see gains with the bees. Um, Anything that we can do to continue to create antiviral and antimicrobial opportunities inside the colony, for me, I think that's a net gain. You've heard Bob Benny and a lot of other folks talk about how hard digesting capped honey is for the bees throughout the wintertime. If you've one thing that we did early on is we stopped using dry sugar um, for overwintering needs. What we were constantly finding, and I couldn't never understand it, is I'm always wondering, like when we go back and check on the mountain camp or the dry sugar or the bricks, you know what the freckles and speckles and spots are in that sugar, right? It's bee poop all over the place. And then what we would notice is on those early flight days, even throughout the wintertime or early spring, we would see just loads and loads of bee poop all over the place. Now, bees pooping is normal, right? But the amount that we were seeing uniformly seemed like that doesn't quite seem right. When we switched over from dry sugar to fondant that had Hive Alive in it, when we started mixing the Hive Alive in the feed late fall going into the wintertime, if we can get 1 gallon or 2 gallons of ProSuite with Hive Alive in on every single colony, to me, I think it's helping with their overall gut biome, their gut digestion, enhancing any kind of antiviral or antimicrobial opportunity inside of the colony.
Mm-hmm.
What's that worth to you? If you don't find value in that, then you're wasting your money if you're mixing it with ProSuite, because ProSuite's going to be stable, right? So we're not mixing the Hive Alive in the ProSuite to make it any more stable. We have just found every year, putting this on hundreds of colonies every single year, that we're finding gains with it, and so we keep doing it. And so it's one of those situations where enough repetitions of doing a certain thing is yielding similar results that we weren't seeing prior to using those products. And so that's why we decided to go ahead and keep with it and make it a part of our management practice.
Yeah.
There's some good questions coming across.
Yeah.
Gary Stewart. Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Lindsay Homestead, Jeremy Lindsay, what a good dude down there in Tennessee. And I'm trying to think, Jeremy, you commented, Susan and I were down there on a little getaway for our anniversary, not far from, I think he's in, is it Dandridge area? And I think he may have bees on a restaurant down there somewhere in Pigeon Forge or Gatlinburg. But anyways, I digress. How has the fall flow been in the StreamTeam areas? Bruce, how's the fall flow been for you down in the Dothan area?
We were so dry in August and September that I don't know. I mean, I'm seeing the bees bringing in some pollen. We have goldenrod blooming. I think it's in full bloom right now down here, but I don't know that they're bringing in a lot of nectar. I haven't seen, they're not just filling the hives up with nectar or honey. But there is stuff blooming. I'll put it that way. And I know they're bringing in pollen, and I think they're bringing in enough to stay healthy, and it's trickling in. And so in some of my bee yards, I haven't fed because they've got plenty of weight, and in others I've had to feed them or they would have starved. And so it's just kind of weird how within this 20 to 30 mile radius or, of the area that it can be so different in different bee yards. Ozark was in trouble after I made those splits in late August and or in late July and August, because I split them and they just consumed the stores so quickly. But yeah, we've got flowers blooming right now, but I don't know that we're having a great flow just because it's been so dry.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Brian?
My area, I tell you, I think it was my last video. I basically said what our flow was, and it was pretty much a bust. We were setting ourselves up for what I thought was going to be a bumper crop. But then we went through the entire month of September, and in my area, they registered, it was like 1.1 inches of rain. So everything just dried up, and it was literally nothing. And this is the first year this is my 7th season. This is the very first year that I ever had to, like when I was pulling supers, I was having to stop because they were starting to get at each other and I was getting into some robbing, and I've never had it like that. So it just, our flow was pretty much nothing. So
Mm.
yeah.
It seems that that's been the case for a lot of folks in the Midwest, Northeast, Southeast areas. You get further southeast, and I don't think goldenrod's really a prolific or a flow to speak of. Here, at least in the Ohio Valley area, goldenrod has historically been respectable, in some years very nice. But it seems like if we have a really good late spring, early summer flow, it's almost too greedy to expect to get a really good fall flow too. Here, the blooms came so early and it was beautiful. But if you notice, there wasn't any bees working anything for quite a long time. Brian, that video when you came out and you and I were kind of uh, going down a philosophical route with the bees and all that, and the goldenrod one that variety had just bloomed. There were bees that were flirting with it and trying to see if there was anything on there, but they would hit it and they would move on, and they were getting a little bit. It was that next variety that came on that was actually a producing variety, and it just the weather just wasn't right. I think it was too dry ahead of the goldenrod, where the plants just didn't have the gumption in the soil, in the root systems, to pull from anywhere to produce enough nectar. There was some pollen, but there just wasn't the nectar. And I really didn't start smelling goldenrod until we seen aster, which goes back to, I think, a lot of the really, I don't want to say offensive, but the really strong smell, I think, is more associated with aster than it is the goldenrod. But it's usually that crossover time where you've got goldenrod and aster at the same time, where you really start to smell those smells in the bee yard there. But we didn't have a good flow at all. We didn't get around to pulling all of our supers, thank God, because we had that 5 to 6 week stretch where it was so dry that a lot of folks in this area, in the Ohio Valley area, found that their bees, they were all squared away with the flow from June and the first part of July. When we got into the end of July, going into August, it was like lights out on nectar. And it got so dry that the bees started moving up into the super or up into that second brood box. And the bottom boxes were ghost towns, and there was nothing in them at all. And so if you weren't looking at that and you weren't putting feed on, you might have found yourself in a bind. Well, I've got colonies right now that we use 1 and 2 gallon buckets. On the 2 gallon buckets, the great thing about ProSuite is you're socking away 23 pounds of storage in out of one bucket. That's a big deal. So they're taking it. Jake was putting some pretty much the last of the most of the last treatments on colonies this evening with Apigard, and he said, "Yeah, Dad, the buckets they're pretty much empty." So if a colony has taken 23 pounds of feed,
wow, that's a lot.
That's a big deal. What would this look like if we hadn't had the ProSuite on there? I don't know. That'd be
right.
Or feed in general. The last thing I want to say about that is you do not have to go to the expense of ProSuite. You don't have to go to the expense of Hive Life. You don't have to do any of these things. And if the price points or the value or benefit you don't see, there is no reason why you have to do any of those things. What we're doing here is simply sharing our experience with it and honestly saying, here's what we're seeing, not in 1 or 2 or 10 colonies, but hundreds and hundreds of colonies year after year. So we're seeing results every single year on hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of colonies. That's the only reason why we do this. That's the only reason why we even became distributors of Hive Alive, was initially to be able to get bulk, get that product here at an affordable rate, and then pass on those savings to folks who may or may not find value in it. So you cannot, if you think about this, the last thing I want to say is, cool, mix up 1 to 1, mix up 2 to 1. mix up whatever ratio you think you need to do that. But the fact of the matter is, we're looking for weight. We're not looking for volume. And what you'll find is you will mix up 4 1-gallon buckets of 1-to-1, at least 4, that you have to put on that colony has to process 4 gallons of liquid for every nearly 1 gallon of ProSuite. So because of the density, the viscosity, and the concentration of it, as far as volume goes, they're processing a lot less of it. And they're as far as time frame, they're doing it in about the same time frame. So when you see folks saying, well, "Oh my gosh, my bees are taking down an entire gallon of feed a day or 2 days," it's a 1-to-1. Try a 2-to-1, and then try something thick like a ProSuite, and you'll see that the rate of which they're taking the feed, it increases dramatically. I think they will have to work way less hard to process and get the same amount of sugar out of that volume.
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff.
You guys trying to get me fired up tonight?
I know. We're going to change off of feeding here for a second. Look at this.
Oh, thank God.
Question for the group. I've seen people looking for queens here lately, and he is in West Virginia. Do you think getting a queen now will make a hive survive the winter?
Let's talk about that. Before we just answer that, Bruce, let's talk about what is going on inside a colony if you were to requeen right now, and how does that play into whether or not the colony would actually be successful through the winter? Bruce, what are your thoughts on this?
I think that is very regionally, very regional. Location. Down here, we're still warm. The bees are still, brooding. They still have brood in the colonies. And, I just, like a week or 2 ago, put some new queens in there. We talked about that earlier in the chat. So I'm not sure up north. I do know that if you're going to try to have a new queen in a colony or requeen a colony, I think it needs to be a mated queen at this time of the year. Because if you think about trying to have them make emergency queens or start from scratch, or even a virgin queen that's got to get mated, are there drones in the area? Like in Ozark, there aren't very many drones at all, but Eric will tell you, we saw drones all over the place in Slocum, which is about 25 or 30 miles south. And so, it's really a risk, I think, even in this area here in Alabama, to try and make new queens this late in the year. Now, I know some areas down in South Florida, they're probably make queens most of the year, in Hawaii and places like that. But I think it's risky. I think it's if you're going to requeen, it needs to be a mated queen if you can find one. And I think it's what you need to do. A lot of people just combine colonies at this time of the year when they start to see problems. But here in Alabama, it's not, I don't think it's too late to requeen. The thing about a mated queen is, once she's released, she can go right to work. She can get busy and start laying. And so they just about don't skip a beat. Almost. It's just a few days until they release her and she goes. Lots of times they're super motivated. Those queens get going, and you may actually have a little bit of a pickup in the population. If you get a new queen in there this time of the year, she'll go to town and build up good for the wintertime as well. Possibly, Greg. I'm not sure what you think about that, but a new, fresh, motivated queen may be more likely to fill that colony up with some good winter bees than an older queen that's been in there a while. Those are just a couple of concepts or principles that come to mind.
Yeah.
I think you nailed it there. It's the thing you got to think about is, okay, why would you be requeening this late? How do the bees perceive that? How do they react? What do they do with a queen this time of year naturally? If they were to do that kind of a thing. Me personally, I'm a big fan of requeening late in the year, primarily as we go through the last of our treatments. When we go through the last of our spot checks. If we get into colonies who are queenless for whatever reason, I intentionally have mating nukes that are still just cruising along, doing their thing, so that if I need to, I can plug in that queen, boom, right into that colony, and that way I'm not losing, 6 to 10 frames of bees because of a queen failure or who knows what happened. So for me, I think if you were trying to make a split and make your own queen this late, hey, I'm not the kind of guy to tell anybody not to do something, but what I can tell you from my experience is here in East Central Ohio, Jake and I mean, we're now done, but in the last couple weeks, we've been catching drones, trying to collect semen, and work on our artificial insemination techniques. And what we found is that a lot of the drones that are still hanging out, when you actually look at them, especially under a microscope, their wings are tattered, they're beat up, they're old dudes who are just on the way out anyways. Today we still have drones, right? But if a healthy colony has up to 10% population in drones this time of year, I mean, you're talking 1%, if not even probably that much. It's very hard when you pull a frame out to really get a good look of drones. You might see 1 to 4 per frame. That is not a lot. So if you think about a queen that has to go out and get mated, she's just not going to have the type of mating opportunities that she would have. The drones that are in the colonies right now are so old, they're not sexually viable. Their semen starts to change. I mean, you see that under a microscope where you have this fleshy, beautiful color, earthy semen pockets on top of white mucus. You don't have that late in the year. It all changes. Everything kind of turns dark, and they change. And so trying to open mate a queen or make one this late in the Ohio Valley area, I think, is a huge risk. But if you have access to somebody who has queens, or if you had made queens earlier in the year and you've got a little queen bank or a little bit of a nuke yard you're trying to fix up, I would not hesitate at all to plug in queens into those colonies to get those colonies off to a good start.
Hey, Greg, quick question for you. If, for example, you wanted to combine some colonies, I see some people talking about how in their area they're combining colonies. What method do you use to do that? Do you do the newspaper combine? What do you do? Like if you have a couple weak colonies, you want to put them together, what do you do?
It's a shake and bake, whack and stack, and move on. I would recommend folks probably use newspaper. Reason being, just because I can get by with it doesn't mean that you should. If something goes wrong in my yard, I can find a queen and get things moved on. I can move the resources out. For me, when I'm going through here in the next 2 to 3 weeks and putting everything in their configuration for wintertime, if I get into a colony and there's not a queen and I have a colony next to it and it does have a queen, especially on a cooler day where they're not real active, not doing a lot, I've got no problem just stacking boxes and moving on and just keeping things moving, especially when we migrate the last of the specifically here at this mating yard, we've got queens and mating nukes still in both 5-frame deeps and 5-frame mediums. So what I'll end up doing is going through in all of the little 5-framers that we've pulled queens from or removed queens here or there. I'll take those 5 frames out of that 5-frame box, slap those into 10-frame supers, and I'll do a combine in the nuke yard of all of the bees, and then just slap those onto 10-frame singles that could use a super, put a bucket feeder on, let them backfill, let them use the bees, and then just kind of cruise right along. And then the last thing I'll do is take any other colonies that are like, if I've got like a really jamming 5-frame nuke, if it's a 5/5, for me, what I'm doing is I'll put those over a double screen board over another colony that's maybe in doubles and let them cruise and use the heat moving on up. Anything that's 3 to 5 frames of bees, for me, it's consistency and uniformity is becoming more important for me than anything. So I'd rather put these colonies over a double screen board over a strong colony, let the heat rise through the screen and keep those other colonies there than trying to fool with so many little individual 5-framers here and 3-framers here and da-da-da-da-da-da. So.
Yeah, good stuff. I love this. Thinking about next year, what are the success percentages for packages only ever done over winter nukes? Oh, man.
I'll take this one last.
Yeah. I know because
I've got a lot to say about that. Bruce, I know Bruce has been honest. You know, he's got limited experience in that arena. But Bruce, what are your thoughts on package B percentage survival rates versus nukes?
I've never shaken a package into a hive, so I have zero experience with that. I got started with nukes, and I've I create my own nukes and grow them into 10 frame hives all the time. And so my experience is with the nukes, but we had a really good discussion. I think it was on your channel, Greg, back earlier in the year about packages
Nukes
versus
versus
nukes.
packages. Yep.
And that might be a good one to go back and watch because you spent a lot of time talking about the advantages. And after hearing that video, I realized there are some advantages to packages, but I really don't have enough experience to intelligently talk about. I've just never done packages. I'm not to say I won't in the future, but once I got my nukes and got enough bees to where I didn't really need to go buy a lot of bees in the future, I just pretty much grown my own thing. And so I've replaced a lot of queens and a lot of mated queens, and either intentionally or unintentionally, made quite a few of my own queens. But I've done that, introduced queens. But as far as packages and just dumping them in a box and moving on, I haven't done that.
Yeah.
Brian, what about you?
So 3 years ago, there was a winter where I lost all my colonies, and folks can go back a couple years and they can watch videos and all that stuff on that. But when I restarted from packages. And what more steered me towards packages was I had a very bad experience with nukes and purchased a nuke from somebody, and it was not a good nuke, and it did not even make it through the season. So that kind of steered me away from nukes. When I started with packages, I mean, I will add also, set aside from me starting with packages, my whole method of beekeeping had changed because I had looked at what happened in the past and what I needed to do in the future to keep them alive. So my management of them had changed, but the packages, they did wonderful. I split, when I got them from Greg, I even got a couple extra queens. So I dumped a little bit here, dumped a little bit there. So you have more options if you want to get packages. I will say for Steve, like if you want to say get, depending on the numbers, you could get however many packages, let's just say 4 packages and get 4 extra queens, and then boom, you've got 8 colonies. So I think options, you have those options with packages, and they work exceptionally well. I'll say too, and I know Greg won't talk about it because his lovely wife isn't standing there with him to talk about her hive, but there was a package that was dumped into a top bar hive, and
Oh man.
that thing now, when you look at it, is massive. So packages do exceptionally well. It's just, they each have their benefits, though. I'll say that, there's pros and cons to each. And like, Bruce has said, I mean, we've had other discussions on it, but, Steve, I would say just do it.
Yeah, there's a lot of comments in here, and it makes a lot of sense. People are saying if you have drawn comb, the packages, it's a big advantage with packages. It really helps them get going. And so, Greg, you might have been going to address that, but that is a key. I mean, obviously, if you got comb, they don't have to build and start completely from scratch. That'll help.
Yeah.
To save folks, primarily to save Bruce and Brian from hearing me go on a extremely long rant about this, because we have been involved in this dialogue for quite a long time. And if folks don't already know, we sell both. We sell packages and we sell nukes. There is a difference. There are different markets for each. Each have different opportunities for folks, and one's not better than the other. You can't just say which is best. That you cannot make that assumption. That's like saying what's better, a swarm, a nuke, a package. You can't. What are your goals? What's your context? What's your scale? What are you trying to do? Drop time, Chris. Chris, man, he knows. Chris is a good dude. He's been here at the Learning Yard enough to know where this conversation goes. But I'll say this: you have to understand. You have to know why either is appropriate, and if you don't know why either is appropriate, then that's where you need to really spend time and talk with somebody who can without trying to sell you either one, tell you the pros and the cons. What I can say is one thing that I hear all the time, and it is absolutely laughable, respectfully, is that whatever you do, there's two big sales schemes. Gosh, I'm going to get in trouble. Brian, if you weren't demonetized before now, you will be after this. So my apologies. I'll have to leave you another super chat. One of the biggest myths, it's a fallacy that constantly is regurgitated, and it's primarily regurgitated by those who sell nukes only, is they say, whatever you do, don't buy those junk Georgia packages. Heck, it could be packaged from California. It could be, it doesn't matter where it is. It's the idea that they come from anywhere other than the magical land. What was I'm a little too young to remember it, but I still kind of remember the song Puff the Magic Dragon. And there was, what was the magic land? Honolulu or
Oh, geez. I just know he lived by the sea.
Lived by the sea in the magic land. Anyways, you pick the magic land. Some folks really are this mindset that the magic land where their mailbox is the most, it is the place they want their bees to be the most adapted to. And there is some truth to that, but there is also a lot of fallacy with that too. And I think we've seen it year after year, but one of the funnest examples is this top bar hive, which has been the bane of my existence, Susie's primarily. And Brian was here, and we had an extra package that somebody didn't pick up, and they kind of backed out on last minute. And I mean, we've got plenty of bees here. I don't need to go install packages. And so we just literally threw these packaged bees inside of this top bar hive, just thinking, why not? It was more just kind of fun, because I knew Brian was there, and we'd have a little fun, back and forth. And so we threw that package in there. And had to use Bruce's word, which is now, I think, me and Brian's word more than it is Bruce's word. But those jokers, it was kind of like they just looked back at us, and it was one of those, what's that phrase, hold my beer kind of scenarios. They just took off, and those jokers, they just kept building and building and building and building and building. And they're in a top bar hive. I mean, I'm not getting in there with Formic. I can't get in there with Apigard. I got in there with Formic once or twice. And Keith Spielman, hashtag Susie 50 top bar hives. Oh, man. Anyways, long story short, we threw these junk packaged genetics inside of this, junk in quotes, in this top bar hive, and they did their thing. They were extremely prolific. This is too long of a conversation already. But imagine putting a top bar hive, which is a completely exposed bottom, right? On a little tiny wood frame, singled out on its own. Imagine putting that in the worst possible orientation for wintertime, which were to be if it has continual wind from the west beating on it all year or all winter long. Well, that's this top bar hive. And it just sat there and it just cruised. It did its thing. It almost swarmed this year. I gave them all the room now on the entire top bar. Guess what they're still doing? They're still flying in and out. They're still doing their thing. I haven't even gotten in there. I've got two hives that it's funny because when folks, they're like, well, how do you, don't you know it's illegal for you to have a beehive that doesn't have removable frames? How dare you? Well, here we got a top bar hive. There's no way I'm getting inside of there. Philip Morris, a 2-minute limit. Yes, we're already past that. I don't even know where I was going. Philip, you just totally broke my train of thought now. The 2-minute buzzer just went off. Wherever I was going with it, thank Philip, because it just drowned. I can't even think what I was going to say. You guys have heard the story a million times, but that package took off, exploded, laughs at us.
Yeah.
Has had 1 or 2 rounds of Osalic last year. Nothing this year. It's just cruising, doing its thing. If you want to hear me ramble on more about some of this, leave a comment. We'll talk about it later. I don't want to hijack tonight's show going down this rabbit hole, but there's also a live stream we did at the spring of the year, nukes versus packages. But the last thing I'll say about that is be mindful of a lot of the marketing ploys where you go ahead and buy my package bees now, and then in a month you go ahead and requeen those junk genetics with my locally adapted queen. I'm of the opinion where if those genetics in that package weren't good enough to sell to your customer, you shouldn't be selling them a queen later. I think that's poor business and that's poor practice. The second thing is we'll be talking about a lot more coming up here soon, but we are going to be in the season where we're going to start taking orders for queens and nukes and all those kind of things too. One of the biggest nuke schemes. I'm going to get in so much trouble. But there are folks, I'll leave the states out, who are buying bees, doesn't matter from where, but they're primarily coming from California or coming from Georgia. But they're being marketed and sold. They're being brought up on a semi-load at a time, nearly. They're being brought up to the northern states, and folks are selling these as overwintered Ohio or overwintered Pennsylvania or overwintered Indiana nukes. And they're nothing but nuke. The bees literally just came out of the almonds, or they came up from Georgia or California, thrown in gesture boxes and sold. And the problem with that is the beginning beekeeper, they don't know the questions to ask. They don't know who to trust. They don't know to get a list of reference. They don't know all those things yet. All they know is their bee club just told them they should buy nukes. They're better than packages. They buy these nukes, and it's nothing but problems. So the pros and cons, there are a lot of pros and a lot of cons of each, but not every nuke is created equal, and not every package is created equal. And we'll talk more about it as the season goes on.
Yeah.
Sorry that took so long.
No,
where's Philip at? Philip, you're our 2-minute buzzer man. If we go on for too long, you just comment. You just say 2 minutes up.
Yeah. You know what you said though there, the new beekeeper does not know what questions to ask. That goes for all areas of beekeeping.
Yeah.
Because, set aside, let's say somebody wants to start. Right now it's, we're October 11th, and if someone on here is thinking about getting bees and they're like, what should I do for next year, 2024? I hear that I need to buy bees now for 2024. And okay, that's true. And you might not know what questions, but there's all the other areas in beekeeping where they might not know what questions to ask. What, should I treat my bees? What should I treat them with? Is there information out there? What, these different treatments, is there information out there? The different supplements. I saw somebody in here just saying, where's the data on Hive Alive? Hive Alive is open about it. And if you go to their site, and you could even email Dara or David or any of them, and they'll provide you, there's independent studies on Hive Alive, so it's a proven product. They've got the data behind it, but there's things out there that might not have the data. Doesn't mean that they're not good, but it's just the new beekeepers. I think you need to really put in the time and do some research. And anyone out there, like, and we'll talk about Hive Alive, and we'll talk about Hive Alive, any of those companies out there that are pushing their products, where their products have been tested and by independent folks. I could test my own product, and I could make something, and I could tell you, hey, this is wonderful, and I'm going to do this and that, and tell everybody, well, where's the proof? Where's the data? But those other companies like Hive Alive, they have the data, and they'll offer it up. Here it is. Here's the proof. Here's what it's done. So you just have to know what questions to ask. And like a forum like this here, while, and I'm sure Greg will say it, Bruce will say it, I know I'll say it, and I'll say it over and over and over. I am no expert. I just stay transparent in what I do as a hobbyist. Do your research. If you're looking up products, do your research. And don't just jump at it because there's a video, and don't just jump at it because there's anything, and like everybody said, it's regional. Like when we were discussing queens, it's very regional. If you watch, like, Greg is south of where I'm at, so we're in Ohio. What we're doing now is completely different than what Bruce is doing. So
Yeah.
just beekeeping is so regional, and there's a lot of factors. So
Yeah.
Philip Morris put me in timeout for 2 turns for going so long on the last one. So Bruce, it's all you. Anything to add
No,
about that?
I was just going to say, look, I mean, it's, I see there's a comment there about, have you guys ever cared to look at the data being that you're pushing it? And that's, I think, what Brian was trying to say, that yes, I mean, and, I've always been transparent about the fact that I try a lot of different things on my channel with my bees, and some things work, some things don't. And if you don't use the products I use, I don't care. It's fine. Just use whatever works best for you. And there are a lot of good products out there. It's those things that just because I say it or one of you guys says it doesn't mean that's the only thing to use. I mean, for example, Greg loves ProSuite. I would love to try it, but I don't have access to it like there's readily, available here. There's just no Man Lake distributors close by. And so I do what I do, but the bees are doing fine using either product. And so I think, as opposed to feeling like, these are things that we use, but it doesn't mean you have to use it, or we feel any differently, or you can use whatever you want. And I think that everyone has to just figure out what works best for them. And so that's kind of where we're at. And, I use it all. I believe in it. I think it works well, but if you don't agree, then, I think some people, I think even Cayman said that bees, and they do great just on straight up sugar syrup. But if you're gonna, there are some advantages to using supplements at times as well. So you just got to decide what works best for you. And that's all we're ever trying to do. We're not trying to discount anybody else's opinions on what they're trying to do. I don't believe, I hope we've never done that on here as far as different things that you're trying to use out there. That's entirely up to you. And I hope that's what we're trying to do with this whole StreamTeam thing, is to realize that this is a community. We're all here together. We all have our different ways of doing things. But we're not trying to tell anyone what to do. We just share what's kind of working for us. And, so that's kind of my little soapbox there, I guess. But I would encourage new beekeepers to do your research and to, you got to try, you got to put the bees in a box and try some things and figure out what works best for you. I'm still trying to figure out what works best for me. And as I hone that in, kind of like Greg, you've had so many colonies, you've been into so many boxes of bees that in your area that what works best for you. Like you mentioned earlier, hundreds of colonies a year that you're going through, if not thousands every year. And so, that's what works for you. And we're all still trying to just hone it down and get better and better and better at what we're doing constantly. And so that's kind of where we're at with everything. We're not trying to, tell someone else what to do. It's like Mike Berry says, it's not a how to, it's a how I do. And that's exactly kind of what we're trying to do.
That's it. Yeah. I do know, and I'll step off of the soapbox after this. The data's out there, and I'll get it. If I find the links, I'll throw them in the descriptions. That way people can go to it and see it afterwards. But set aside from that, I do know what I've observed in my apiary, and that's colony strengths like I had never seen before. Now, my management, like I said, has changed as far as my integrated pest management, just overall my management changed. But in my area, what I sit back and I take, pride in is when I'm looking in the early spring and I see pictures and I see people talking in local areas, and we're like, oh, I've got 2 and 3 frames of brood and the colonies are starting to build up. My darn, those, and I'm going to use Bruce's word there, those jokers, they're every single frame and they're spilling over out of the boxes. So they have been very, very strong. But it goes back to several things. There's set aside from the benefits that, we know that it keeps the syrups from fermenting, but in our area where the bees are locked up for, it could be months, it helps their gut health. It's been proven to help against nosema, the different foul broods. So there's all those other benefits. You know, and we could get on the soapbox about it, but I'll do some work. Um, I'll see if I can't find like some independent studies, and if I've got to reach out to, I know Fred Dunn has done some research into it. So, you know, Fred is an excellent resource to have in the beekeeping community. So if I need, I'll reach out to Fred and see where I can get some information, but I'll find it for y'all.
Well, I would say too, you know, you can get that information. You can get it from the companies as far as where to go to look for the studies. I know some people are like, well, that's information from the company, but you know, for example, and I'm just throwing Hive Alive out there. I think it is the number one supplement used in Europe. It's been there for a long time, and it's just kind of, I think it's been in the U.S. for a while, but you know, and I like what Ian says here: feed for a purpose, put supplements in for a purpose, run tests, find the product that works in each area, and that's the bottom line. I mean, we can, you know,
Yep. Yeah.
My scientific method of doing things is to try it and see what happens.
Yeah.
And then if it doesn't work, if I don't think it's helping me, then I don't use it anymore. And if I believe it works, or if I believe, you know, there's a benefit to it, then I use it. And that's just what I do in my bee yard. And so
I've
Bruce,
said exactly.
tag team. Philip said I can get back in the chat. tag team. Right. Right. Go up. Go up.
Boom, boom.
There we
Okay.
go. Okay. Hey, it's this simple. Let's just cut through the baloney. Okay. What you do in your apiary is between you and your bees.
Yeah.
That's right.
If it's working, great. If it's not, try something different.
Yeah.
There is not a single one of us. There are so many things that all of us do in the bee yard that, I mean, is there a peer-reviewed study on the application of ProSuite in a bucket feeder and studies and trials? No, there's not. Right? There are certain products and certain things that we want to have a little bit more information on before we subject our colonies to whatever that it is. Ian's on here specifically. How many products has Ian seen come and go, not just with bees, but with row crops or anything else on the farm that come in, they come out. Some things you don't learn until later that had a negative outcome. Some things that had such a positive net gain that you do it every single year. There is an enormous amount of trial and error as a beekeeper. We in no way are discouraged, folks, for figuring out what works for you. What we're simply saying is, here's what we are finding works for us, and we're sharing that. The last thing I'll add about that is, this is not just on 1 or 2 or 10 colonies. This is over hundreds and hundreds of colonies over several years between the 3 of us. And the list goes on and on and on. The type of products that we're using, the types of products that we are collaborating with, they are also Hive Alive, for instance. Whether you like it or not, you don't have to. No, there's not a single one of us. We are still going to be friends. Whether you use Hive Alive, whether you use Apis Biologics, whether you use Pro Health, whether you name the additive, the supplement, whatever that it is, at the end of the day, what kind of jurisdiction is there really for supplements? It's a different ball game than jurisdictions for miticides and treatments. When you get into the treatment aspect of what we're putting on our colonies, there is oversight, there is regulation, there are things that put us all into neat and little tidy box on what we can and can't do based on what continent you're in, what country you're in, what state you're in, and what you're doing with your bees. All right. At the end of the day, every single one of us, I hope, the main goal is to have healthy, happy bees that overwinter so we can keep doing it year after year. Okay. You do you. You do what's best for you and your bees, and whatever that is between you and your bees. And I'm totally cool with you doing whatever that looks like. Okay. So it's not a us and then them. It's not a this or that. You do you. Okay. I'm tagging Brian. There you go. You're up. Go this way.
Hey, there's some other questions in here. I don't know if we missed some.
Yeah. This is a good one here. Should I feed 1-to-1 when putting in late queens to help them brood up better?
Oh. That's a great, what a beautiful question. Straight Creek Apiary, Brian G. What part of the country are you in? I think that matters. Bruce, what do you think? My 2 minutes were already, I don't have Philip and they're buzzing me off again.
I will tell you this. I did feed, and 1-to-1. I mostly use 1-to-1. It's just, mine is probably a little thicker than that most of the time, but I'm not super scientific about how I do it. But yeah, I've fed 1-to-1 when I've introduced those queens from you, and I think it helps the bees be happier. I think it helps them, possibly, be less, if you're feeding them all, whether it's open feeding or however you're feeding, bucket feeding, open feeding, trickle feeding, in hive feeding. I think if the bees are if food is coming in and they're happy, I think they're less likely to be robby.
Bingo.
I think when bees are super defensive and robby, if some bees are trying to rob other bees, if bees are if they're testing each other, you put a new queen in a colony, I think they're going to be more agitated and maybe a little more defensive when you put a new queen in. This is just really, honestly, I haven't done this late a season introduction. I don't think ever. And so I went ahead and I fed them quite a bit the last few weeks. And then I fed them, Eric will tell you, I fed them the day before I introduced those queens. When he was up there with me, we got them set up, we fed them, and they were just as calm as they could be. And I think that's the key. I think it's a great idea to feed your bees, especially this time of the year. If there's a dearth and you're trying to introduce queens, I think they're going to tend to be less aggressive and robby if they're happily eating. I know in some areas of the country, you're not supposed to open feed, or it's illegal. Some people don't believe in that, but I think sometimes open feeding can give the bees the impression that they're actually going and collecting food. It might keep them busy. Also, the trickle feeding, I like that aspect, Greg, with the buckets, because they're slowly, they're kind of staying satisfied. They're not just engorging the food down really fast, but they're able to kind of be happy and working and busy. That's just my take on it. But I think if the food's coming in, if they're feeling fat and sassy and they're just happy, they're much more likely to accept a queen, especially late in the season or during a dearth.
You said it perfect. That's fed happy bees. They have less of a reason to be cantankerous. And so I think one of the tricks that we have always done, not always, it took us a little while to figure it out. And once we figured it out, started implementing it, it doesn't matter what time of year it is. If we are introducing a queen or we're making those splits, we have got buckets on top, because just that trickle effect, bees knowing that there is something coming in, they're cooler to work with. They're calmer, way less going on. And I think the question was 1-to-1 in brooding on a new queen. This is going to be extremely, I don't know if can you see the farm? Look, what does that say up there, Brian?
The contrary farmstead.
Contrary farmstead. So I'm just going to throw this out there. You know what ratio we feed all year? ProSuite. What ratio is ProSuite? I don't know. 3-to-1 or better. We feed it in the very early spring, and we draw out gobs and gobs of wax on tons and tons of brand new frames. They brood up. They have beautiful sheets of brood. We put it on in the middle of the season when they need it. As we're making splits, we put it on at the end of the season. So can bees do better on thinner or thicker syrups? I'm not even going to get into that argument. But what I'm going to say is that they will do all the tasks that they need to do. Let me rephrase that. The bees that we're working with under our management do all the things that we need them to do without mixing ratios, by just feeding it to them straight. When Bob Denny and I were down in Florida on that little tour with the Florida beekeepers, filming and learning and having a good time down there, I'll never forget, I love Bob. He has a very specific way he does things, because he also has a track record of it working and why, and that's what he does, right? End of story. So we're down there, and we're at the Werner's place, Indian Summer, and we're there with Pete Ellis, and right inside of their one of their sheds there is a couple totes of feed. And Bob says, "So, well, hey Pete, what feed are you using within the totes there?" And Pete says, "Well, Bob, that's just straight 55," knowing that Bob was going to have reaction. And Bob says, "Oh, well, isn't that interesting? So you don't thin it down or mix it or anything?" Sometimes if we think about it, we do, but otherwise it just goes on straight. And the bees do okay on that. Yep, Bob, they do great. So is 1-to-1 better for certain things? Like, just if we get into the metabolism and how, I'm sure that it is, but the net gains on that for a lot of us isn't even worth fooling with when we can feed it straight, no mixing, and put it on. So if you're going to put a queen in, I would just make sure it has feed. Whatever's convenient for you, you can mix, you can get on there, get the feed on, and it helps. And I think it really does help with queen acceptance.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff.
We got some good questions rolling in here.
Question: what's your feelings about balancing versus combining?
Brian, what do you think?
So, I just always have combined. It's something that, um, from the very beginning, if I had problems or I had colonies that, you know, like this time right now, if I had an issue with a colony that lost a queen, and I'm probably from September on, I would just combine. And combining, it was always a paper combine, and I've always had success with them. Never had a paper combine fail. Um, I do need to, moving forward, because I have a very specific plan as far as, and no comments on this 30 and all that stuff. And I've only purchased 10 queens so far from Greg, but I have a very specific plan for when I'm setting up this nuke bench. But I probably should get my resource hives going again. That way I can balance some things out and, just kind of play with that a little bit more. But as of like right now, I don't have a ton of like background and just balancing things out. I've just always combined.
Yeah. Bruce, what about you?
I don't do a lot of any of it. I just kind of, I probably should combine more. I really just kind of monitor the strength of the colonies moving through. And if they're weak, I either combine, I could combine, or I just kind of maybe dump them out and just let the bees figure it out, let them fly to their colonies and strengthen them. I haven't done a lot of combining or equalizing. I've done a little bit, but not much. And so that's something I need to, probably look into more. But I found by doing that, I kind of can determine or see which colonies are going to be the strongest. I kind of like to see how they're going to respond and what they're going to do. A lot of queens, actually, Greg, and some of those Carniolan or Caucasian type genetics that I have, where they just brood way back and you think you're going to lose them. So you're like, oh my gosh, this colony's weak. And then boy, coming out of spring, they just explode. And so I kind of just like to see what they're going to do. But you can tell the colonies that are really weak, you can tell if the brood pattern's real spotty, if the bees seem just sick or just like they're phasing out. Sometimes you can just tell they're not healthy. Just because they have a small cluster doesn't mean it's an unhealthy colony, but you can tell lots of times the ones that are, and that's an experience thing. So I haven't done a lot of equalizing or a lot of combining in the past. I've done a little bit, but not much.
Mr. Burns.
I think you got two completely different tools for the toolbox that are done different times a year. We like to equalize colonies as they come out of the spring. So every manipulation, every act on a colony is as uniform as possible throughout the yards. When we get into a situation where, it really has to, combining is a way to mitigate, for me, I think of it as a way to mitigate loss. So if I get into a situation, like there were a couple times this year where our timing was upside down on queen cells. So if I'm in a situation where I've pulled queens, or I do this, or there's a colony for whatever reason doesn't have a queen, and I don't have queen cells, rather than me, and let's say that they aren't making cells, or maybe they are making, or I just don't even fool around. I take that and I just stack it on another colony, let them figure it out. When you get late in the year, I also do the same thing too. I'm not really going through and doing a lot of balancing. Right now I've got a lot of colonies that are just, it's frustrating. The lack of uniformity in the sizes of the colonies. Not so much, nothing hit the race at the same time, but it's all the cleanup. Every yard has a little bit different of a program to it, where some were making nukes, some were making queens, some were just building up for drones, some were doing nothing but used as cell starters and grafting, some were just hosting and trialing queens, some were the breeder queens specifically. So you've got all the different configurations, different number of boxes stacked. And so now it's time of the year where it's like now I'm going through and I'm just looking at the boxes and I'm saying, okay, are you squared away? If you're not, can I do anything to square you away? And a lot of times on those smaller ones, those are getting stacked over double screen boards. I'm not going to pull from a good colony now, unless we have colonies that are just overflowing, which we don't have. You know, this late in the fall, we don't have colonies that are just spitting out 14 and 16 frames of brood, and we're just in our ears of nurse bees coming out. We just don't see that. And so right now, combining is the name of the game for us, which for me is, you know, stacking them and kind of moving away. A lot of great questions tonight.
Man,
And look at this. Looks like I think this isn't that Todd Prater? Look like he's figured out the what do you call those?
Those clowns.
Emojis.
Look at that, 3
Emojis.
clowns for the 3 of us. That's
Yes,
awesome. Thanks, Todd.
exactly.
I think that's what do you call those? Gosh, my brain's fried. There was another comment down there.
What, Three Stooges?
Keith's 3 Stooges, 3 clowns. Yep, I'm sure that's what he meant by it. Keith Spielman said his wife says Greg looks tired, needs a sandwich. If I see a little, I might be a little hangry tonight. I'm back on keto, and so it's been.
Oh man.
Yeah, you know,
3
Susan wants to
jokers.
keep
Oh,
me
3
around.
jokers. 3 jokers. It says
3 jokers. Oh,
Three
nice.
jokers. So by you saying you're back on keto, and I'll, you know, this is one of those squirrel moments. What you're saying is that I need to stop down in the next week or so with a box of donuts.
Hey, you know what? I tell you what. What's interesting is I'm not even craving anything anymore. The most beautiful thing about it, though, is this is the time of year where we're getting all these orders in, getting everything prepped for the conference, growing out the business, trying to plan and chart, and it's the gridiron, gruesome time of the year where I've got to mentally be at my best. And whenever I go back on keto, it only takes me just a couple days, and all of a sudden, you get mental clarity back that you never knew you lost. And so this has not turned into the keto show. But there is something to be said about. I'll tell you this: vote for 3 clowns. That's what I'm saying, Ian. We're definitely 3 clowns.
Yeah.
3 jesters, clowns, you name it.
Right.
Jackasses, you name it. Whatever fits your opinion of it is just fine.
Yes. Greg goes and his mouth.
I need some carbohydrate. You know what I have for dinner here? Look, it's gonna be big stretch. Oh, ready for it? All right, let's see. I'll tell you what. Let's play a game. Whoever can guess what my dinner is, we will send you your choice of a. Let's see what's in here that's fun this time of year. We'll send you a free Varroa. See, I can't even talk. An easy check, a Varroa easy check. How about a 2-dose Formic, or what else is in here that's fun that someone could probably use right about now? A couple bucket feeders. All right. If you can pick, if you can figure out what you can guess, you can keep the guesses going in the comments. Whoever guesses what I have for dinner right now, your fielder's choice. But Yappy's barbecue. You know, I haven't heard from Yappy in a little while there. I'm gonna probably check him and make sure he's didn't get eaten alive by his red-tailed hawk.
Right. Granola bar. That's not quite keto.
But Keith, thanks for the offer of a sandwich. If I was gonna have a sandwich though, would I go like a all in and have like a Monte Cristo, or would I have a nice Cuban with a really good mustard? Or I know. If I was gonna, there's 2. Oh gosh, there's 2 sandwiches. Now it's I'm fighting on the inside. Would Greg go Reuben extra thick corned beef with pastrami and sauerkraut on swirled marble rye? Or would he just go to Tom's Ice Cream Bowl and get a double fried bologna with Swiss mustard, onion rings, and a single dip of Buckeye?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, now that I've completely derailed the show, what's next? Right. All right, let's see. What is the
Slim Jims?
Let's see. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cruise through. So get your guess in. Let's see. Go all the way up to the top here. All right. Let's see. I like this, Carol. That's a great. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, let's see. Nobody. Okay. All right, we've got dried grapes.
What?
What the heck's a dried grape? Oh, it's a raisin. Yeah, no raisins. Gosh. Okay. The granola bar. Definitely not a granola bar on keto. Let's see. Potato soup. Gary Stewart. Potato soup sounds good. Let's see. Ooh, Jams Farm deer. It is about time to get the backstrap assassins out for harvest season. 2 eggs and a hamburger patty. That sounds good. An egg sandwich. Mike Trevis says peanuts. Not sure about that one. Cheese, beef, boiled eggs. That would work. Vegetable soup. Deer meat. Slim Jim. Jerky. Let's see. Cookies.
Meat and veggie.
Man, no one's got it.
All
right, we're gonna let it roll until
It's
someone.
got to have. I think is that bacon involved? Is there bacon involved?
Oh man, that'd be nice. I'm actually less hungry anymore. I'll take my morning routines. I get up. Well, I don't tell you the whole routine, but I don't even eat until about midday now. And I'll have we make a lot of bone broth every year, and just about a coffee's cup worth of well salted bone broth in the morning. Usually now gets me through about midday. And anyways, this has not turned into the Emerald Lagasse show.
Yeah.
Right. Bam! Kick it up a notch.
Yeah.
Let's get back to some questions here. Yeah, you have a bunch of questions started here, Brian. We're almost 2 hours in too, so let's start to think about the end of this thing. Otherwise, maybe we'll have the extra late live show where we just talk about morning routines and dietary restrictions and what pills we're taking. And
yeah. Bruce, what do you got coming up in the next week?
Well, I went out this past weekend and checked on those queens from Greg, and I have some colonies that I have honey supers on. I was thinking about harvesting the ones in Midland City, but I ended up just putting some formic on them. They have some honey supers on them. I don't know that I'm going to harvest any, but I know you can use formic with the supers on, and temperatures are really good for that right now. And so I had not treated them with the apivar because I was thinking about pulling some honey off of them. And so this coming weekend, I've got to go out, and I'm actually going to use the formic pro strips I got from Greg to put on a few more, and just kind of winding things down a little bit. I moved some of the more spicy queens out of Ozark that I'm still got an eye on. Actually, the ones from Corey, I moved them out to Applin Farms, which is a really good spot. Just trying to kind of make Ozark my nice yard, like we've talked about. And so some of those bees are doing really well. They're not as bad as a lot of my bees have been, but they do have a little bit of a bite to them. And so we're going to kind of leave them out there at Applin and see kind of what happens out there. And so I've just been kind of doing little odd things here or there, just kind of cleaning up some things. If you watch my last video, you know what I talk about, just doing a lot of things, checking for mites here or there. I will say I didn't do a video on this. I went to Honey Hill Farm, which is there's 6 colonies there that I've managed for a friend of mine for years. He pays me each year a certain amount of money, and I keep bees out there for 6 colonies and just harvest the honey and deliver it to his door in 5-gallon buckets. So it's a pretty good gig for both of us.
Nice.
But those colonies look really well. I pulled the apivar off of them and we washed 0 mites. So I have 6, 5 of them are really strong. One of them is doing okay. It's not super strong, but didn't wash a single mite. And so this year I had really good success with my apivar. But that's kind of what I'm doing, just little odds and ends. And then we're bottling up honey. Had a couple of big honey orders this week, just kind of cruising, getting ready for winter and everything else. I anticipate having my next video, the follow-up video, where I actually show the results of the queen introduction, probably by this weekend. Hopefully I can get that done. Today I actually put the videos into my computer. I'm going to get them uploaded into the editing software and try and get that done the next 2 or 3 days. Hopefully by Sunday, maybe that'll drop. That's my goal.
Nice. Yeah. And I know Greg, he's got his 2 minutes.
Todd says, Greg, that is not what I meant by the 3 clowns. Well, you could have, and it would have been absolutely spot on. So
yeah,
it was funny either way.
Right. Me, and I didn't even say last Saturday, the market that I did, I actually sold more honey this last Saturday than when I did the very first time. So I'm signing up. I actually emailed the guy to sign up and do the market in November, and I'll probably do December as well. Because both times I've had a really good turnout. So I'm gonna keep doing those. But next week from my place in my apiary, it's just right now with the temps and where we're sitting at, I've got treatments on them, so that's good, and that'll ride out, into November. It's the apivar, so you've got 42 days there, but it's just feed really. So there's not much like with the temps where we're at, and it's going to be dipping down into the 40s at night. Not much beekeeping going on. And when I was over the other day, there was very, very minimal activity out front of the hives. When I would crack a lid and was throwing the strips in, I mean, I was happy overall. Other than that one, I was happy with the clusters that I saw. So, um, but yeah, that's about where I'm at. And next week, I mean, and I think I got 2 videos that I need to do. So hopefully I'll get those done here in the next week as well. So, but that's where I'm sitting at. So, Mr. Burns.
Hey, Greg, before we close it up, I wanted to take just a minute and talk.
What's a marketeer?
What?
Musketeer? I don't know.
Yeah.
Someone said you got to cover Flower Street Farm. I
That's
feel like I
Brian.
know the Brian. Okay. Yeah.
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 Well, before we kind of wrap this thing down, I wanted to talk about Connor Brown over in Israel with Brown and Daughters Honey, I think is the name of his channel, but he lives right there in Israel. And do you mind if I read Brian a couple things he said?
No,
I asked him how he was doing. I think this was the day after the invasion over there, after the events that happened. Let me see if I can find it here. I asked how he was doing. He said, "Thanks for checking in. My house is about an hour away, but the family farm is only about 20 minutes away. Thankfully, they've only had rocket attacks so far, and the terrorists weren't able to reach that far. All of my brothers-in-law are in elite units, so they were recalled to the Army right away. The hospitals are preparing for war casualties, so hopefully I will be of service if needed." He's a doctor. My wife is scared, but our kids are thankfully too young to understand. Thanks for checking in. And then he sent me a picture a couple days later. He had some bucket feeders that he had stored water there. He said, "Using bucket feeders to stockpile fresh water in our safe room. Glad I had them in my car." And then today he said, "Hey, Bruce, hopefully I won't make it to the chat tonight." He says, "I'm going to be doing my best to actually get some sleep. I just wanted to say thank you for your and the community's support during this time. I would love nothing more than to be in a beehive and forget the world, but it's not safe right now, and I just can't justify leaving my family home alone for anything other than work. I look forward to listening to the chat in the morning." So, they're right in the thick of it over there. A lot of crazy things happening in this world, and we're here talking about bees and it's important, but there are a lot bigger fish to fry in the world right now. We need to keep those people over there, the innocent people on both sides, I think, that are going through that right now. I know there's just crazy stuff happening, so just keep those folks over there in your prayers and thoughts. And I just thought I'd bring that up and kind of maybe end this thing with a little bit of a somber note, but there are things much more important, some major things going on right now, some people in a really difficult situations.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I just want to mention, I know I saw someone mention him in chat, that they missed seeing him in chat, but just everybody, remember just to keep Don Bearden in your prayers. So his family's going through just something that I can't even imagine. So, but yeah, just remember also to keep Don in your prayers. So
That's right.
Mr. Burns.
Yeah, I tell you, there's when we get into a mindset of kind of where I'm at right now, there's a whole lot of stuff we could be talking about. There's a whole lot of things that we could, flirt around with and share our excitement on what we're doing here at the farm. But, you know, I don't exactly have the words to really express what I'm thinking, what's on my heart. But as Bruce is reading that, you know, here we are, you know, having fun, talking about bees, fully aware that freedom isn't free. There's been a price that's been bought in blood for that here for us. And you have, we have folks that are in the Middle East that are in constant turmoil, so much that it is not out of the ordinary for families to have shelters and bunkers a part of their dwelling structure as they build those and think about their family homes. We have no idea what that's like here in the United States. And if anything, you know, as we have fun with each other, and while we all may have a different way of keeping bees and which treatments that we use, or treatment free or not treatment free, all that kind of thing makes me absolutely sick right now to think about folks spending so much energy finding ways to figure out how we're different, how to divide, when there are parts of this world right now who are struggling to breathe, struggling to find their family, that they are waiting full of blood, guts, and despair. And so I just want to encourage folks that whatever you do in life, let's not make it an us and them. And I just, there's a lot more. I'm overwhelmed right now with a lot of thoughts, but I just want to encourage folks that it's not just about being a beekeeper. It's about being our brother's keeper. And we have a lot of brothers and sisters overseas right now that are literally living hell right now. Don Bearden as well, him and his family. Let's just keep Don Bearden, the folks in Israel, all in our thoughts and prayers. And then let's also, you know, do a little better here too. You know, let's stop making things about an us and them and the divide and how we do things different. That's not what it's about. I think this coming week and the weeks to come are going to be some extremely challenging and devastating weeks for so many in other parts of the world. It just feels extremely inappropriate to be worrying or fussing about any of these little things when so many big things were going on. So, Connor, if you ever get a chance to hear this, I just want you to know that how much your family and your country and your people are in our thoughts, that are in our prayers. The fact that you're even thinking about bees, and it is extremely humbling, to say the least, that you would be even saying StreamTeam in the same breath or mindset with you and what you're dealing with right there. If there's anything that we can do, please let us know. But just know, Don Bearden, Connor, the folks in Israel, you're in our thoughts and our prayers. And it's a reminder that there is an awful lot of darkness in this world, but in a little light goes a long way. And on that note, Brian and Bruce, I just want to remind folks to be the lighthouse and be the change that you want to see in this world, because God knows we need it.
Yeah. Take care, everyone.